Hello, everyone. Hey, Dario.
Hi,
Good
Anna.
afternoon to the people who are joining us. We are kickstarting our monthly appointment now, where we comment over our latest thematic report. The format is going to be quite similar to the last one, so we will have a bit of introduction and then a Q&A session with my Chief Research Officer, Dr. Dario Heyman. Hello, hello. Let's give people a bit of time to join, and then we can open the conversation.
Yeah.
It's a sunny day in Singapore.
Is it actually that sunny? Is it actually that sunny? Nice.
But we have some interesting highlights to share also this time. As always, we leverage our in-house data power Health Tech Alpha platform. The reports have been published both on our website and for all of our HTA clients, Health Tech Alpha clients, they can simply download the report from the platform itself.
Okay.
Last week, we had a deep dive on Europe. So cardiovascular diseases in digital health solutions focus on cardiovascular diseases in the European landscape, while this week we are focusing on Asia Pacific with myself, Anna, and Dario. I think we can kickstart. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Should we give a bit of time, or the usual?
Let's give it one more minute, always until 3:03, and then we can kickstart on it.
Okay, fantastic. The usual, please use the Q&A or the chat functions to post your questions. Dario will be very happy to take them. But
I will try to comment. I will try to comment on them all, and I have our little discussion today. So always feel free to just bounce them in.
Yeah.
We pick them up as we go.
Fantastic. Yeah, we were going through the report ourselves and trying to comment indeed the insights that the data were telling us. But so this month, is 303.
Exactly.
So this month we are tackling digital health solutions in cardiovascular diseases, and similar to oncology, cardiovascular diseases as a TA has been among the top funded areas historically, and that's why also connected to the mortality rate globally. This is why it's one of the picked diseases that we are diving deeper in our reports. This year, actually the first half of this year compared to last year's first half, we've actually noticed a decrease in funding, somehow compensated by an increase in partnerships with digital health solutions specialized in cardiovascular diseases. The other highlight I would like to mention at this stage, prior to going deeper and opening the conversation with Dario, is that typically cardiovascular disease focused ventures have a higher clinical evidence signal, and clinical trials, for obvious reasons again, tops the ranking when it comes to the category that indeed has the highest clinical robustness based on our internal score. We are going to explain everything about this later. When it comes to geography, interesting, curious enough, actually, because I wasn't expecting that. Europe is hosts, let's say, the largest volume of ventures that have the highest clinical evidence signal, basically. So let me open the conversation, and I will also start by sharing my screen, because we want to share with you also the data and also the work of the research team with these beautiful slides. But fantastic. After these indeed highlights, let's kick the conversation with Dario, because I would like to comment a bit more on what happened globally in digital health cardiovascular disease solutions.
Cool. before we probably do that, let me also roll a bit backwards. So just set a bit of context of cardiovascular diseases. Generally, when we look into it, people all know that cardiovascular diseases are one of the highest chronic disease burdens that are probably existing out there. Just looking into ischemic heart diseases, which is one of the leading causes of cardiovascular disease death, accounted for about 9.5 million deaths around in 2021. And we see about the 200 million daily adjusted life years are roughly lost through to ischemic heart disease. That's one of the stats that was given by the American College of Cardiology a few years ago. CVDs remain one of the top burdens out there. So some of the findings that we have within this report are actually counter arguing about why we should actually look significantly more deeper into CVDs. And it's also not helping so much on the digital health side, considering that we see lots of the advancements happening across oncology, across mental health, across women's health these days. And a lot of the attention that was given in previous years on cardiovascular diseases are a bit lost, which is always good to see of basically where we are right now and also what we would expect moving forward, therefore. You want to put the other slide back on, Anna?
Yes.
Might probably help us. So when we look into cardiovascular diseases, and just taking into consideration that we always roughly say that digital health, to how it exists these days, let's call it the digital health 1.5 or 2.0, kind of started in 2010. So if we just compare cardiovascular diseases to some of the other noteworthy therapeutic areas, oncology, neurology, diabetes, mental health, it is slightly older on an average by ventures that we're seeing within the ecosystem today. 2014 to 2015 is not so much of a difference, but it does highlight the fact that we see that the ventures focused on cardiovascular disease are already very established ventures moving forward. Now, the ecosystem is a bit smaller if you compare this to, let's say, an oncology or neurology, with about 644 ventures at the moment that we are tracking within the platform. There might be plus minus 10% out of them, considering that even we as a database provider are not claiming that our data is always up to speed with everything that is existing out there. Ventures are 18 months in stealth mode before they're fully rolling out. So obviously we have a bit of a delay. So let's say we have around 650 ventures that are currently live and active in there. But then you see, as compared to oncology, for instance, that the number of X's is significantly lower. And also the maturity of the ventures is on an average by our maturity alpha score, lower as compared to, for instance, an oncology, but significantly higher as compared to a neurology. We can keep all of these points a bit into consideration as we are moving through the presentation further on, and highlight some of the why we may see that cardiovascular is not performing as well as it might have as it should do as compared to other therapeutic areas. That's probably just to set the context. Now to look into the geography out there. Now, when we look into where these ventures are primarily located, we have about 200 ventures that are in North America, 135 that are in Europe, and 154 that are in Asia, Pac, Middle East, and South America. Is kind of far behind the curve, even though we have a couple of Israeli ventures that scale very successfully across the United States as well, considering that there are always lots of funding coming from this part of the world. Yeah. Also, if we're comparing now the funding here, North America raised around 2x, almost 3x as compared to what we've seen in Asia Pac with about $4 billion, in Europe always lagging behind in terms of funding, even though what Anna was saying before, we are seeing lots of the regulatory side happening that is very active across Europe and not so much in the other regions. So it's overall a very mature ecosystem that we see. It's very balanced out across the geographies that we have. $16.4 billion invested is significantly strong, that I agree, but we will highlight later on a bit what we're currently seeing within the space. Back to Anna.
Going ahead, yeah. Okay, a bit of comparison with the other years, basically, chronological order.
Yeah, so when we look into the funding here, it's extremely interesting to see. We saw always this upward trajectory with 2019 a bit lower as compared to 2018, 2017 previously, which is not on this slide, looked very similar to 2019. So we had this little bump back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
However, what we're now seeing this year is very tremendous. So we've overall seen that there's a crunch of funding after 21 and 22. Now, cardiology hasn't been as heavily impacted by the funding pushback last year, as we've seen in many other therapeutic areas. Oncology was hardly hit. Mental health was heavily hit. Cardiology wasn't that badly hit previously, but this year we've now seen that this tail of funding crunch has reached cardiology. And we basically now see currently, and this is after Q1, we had a bump of we only saw 3% basically of what we've seen last year, which is significantly lower as to the previous years, which is extremely significant. Now we are basically seeing that, okay, cardiology ventures may not have never returned this return on investment from investments from investors previously. And now it's kind of like this payback. Well, we haven't seen any performance. Why would we invest significantly more capital in there if we can put this into other areas that have shown a stronger return on investment as previously?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually, because again, if we compare also with oncology and with those top TAs, I would have expected a bit more on cardiovascular diseases, considering indeed their widespread incidence in the population. So yeah, quite curious, and also to understand a bit more what are the reasons behind this decline. So what's not working? Is it the value proposition of these ventures? Is it the go-to-market model, et cetera, et cetera? So yeah, I think that remains an open question. Going ahead, I think we have.
Can you put the evidence slide on, and I can highlight a bit of where we see a certain impact area. The scientific evidence.
Okay, yeah, this one.
Okay. So cardiovascular diseases, among all other therapeutic areas, has a huge evidence signal of what we're calling it, which is basically a mix out of the number of publications that you have in a peer-reviewed journal. It can be regulatory approvals across different countries. It could also be the clinical trials that you're performing. Now, all of these are significantly cash intensive. When you want to run a clinical trial, there's a lot of money that you need to pour into it in order to generate the evidence out of that. You cannot launch a cardiovascular solution without having clinical evidence. The amounts, considering that you need to use it within the patient in order to make, for instance, any sort of maintenance of the disease easier for the patient, you need clinical evidence, you need a regulatory approval. Now, this is very expensive. Now, in the years where LP money is not as cheap as it used to be, venture capital or venture capitalists are pushed towards investing in very sustainable business models that are definitely returning the return on investment that is necessary for the LPs to renew their investment into the VC fund later on as well. If you now tell them that you are investing millions of dollars just to prove that your solution clinically works, it scares off many investors because it scares off their LPs, because the time to market is significantly expanded. And therefore, it could be, I'm not saying that this is definitely the reason, but in such a time where money is scarce, it can be one of the underlying reasons why we are currently seeing this massive pushback, and we see more that go for market access, go to bring your product out, as compared to investing in yet another venture that's trying to move towards another biosignal to detect hypertension.
Yeah, definitely. Cash intensive. Yeah. Again, we always, in these conversations, we always come to the business model, and
It's always about the business model.
Yeah, exactly. And the connection with how much money you are making, because at the end we need investors, right? And probably we should figure out a different way of investing. So probably when it comes to digital health, other KPIs should be considered more than the simple ROI, because at the end, digital health, as we always say, it's not fintech, right?
It's not fintech.
So yeah, probably yeah, the impact on patients should have a higher, let's say, scoring in that prioritization framework that investors might use. So, but okay, so by talking about this topic, clinical evidence, we definitely changed the script of this conversation, which is okay. Do we want to go back and comment a bit? What do we have? A bit of let's change the conversation from global to Asia Pacific. Yeah. Which is quite an interesting slide, because it goes also into the maturity of the ventures and where the money is concentrated based on the maturity.
Plus, it also goes towards certain geopolitical issues that we see. So when we look into 21-22, we saw this massive investment peak here across Series D and beyond ventures and Series C. Now, they've always been the main drivers why cardiology has been very heavily invested. Now, the only market, well, it's basically the only market where we see late stage investment like this is primarily China, followed by India. Both countries have currently lots of issues when it comes to the investment of it, right? China, we've seen there was a comment the other day I think it was in The Economist, that foreign ventures are scared of entering China at the moment, considering that they don't know what is happening. And at the same time, Chinese ventures are scared of leaving China, considering that they don't know whether they're going to get hammered with any sort of sanctions when you move to the US, for instance. So we have lots of geopolitical issues here. And this also scares off investors, obviously, again. And then you have a very late stage venture that yet tries to raise another $300-400 million for yet another solution in that space. We don't necessarily see it. However, what we also don't see, and this is what's quite impactful here on the other side, on the right side, we also don't see any early stage investment, considering that the money is scarce at the moment. Early stage investors are also holding their money back and are not investing in another solution where there's no follow-on investor coming later on. So it's like this double-edged sword that is pushing against why would you currently invest into cardiology, which is always a tricky point to be at, because you don't necessarily know where to go. And this is not just in Asia Pac. We only focus here on Asia Pac today, but we see the same across the entire globe for the therapeutic area.
Yeah, true. Let's comment a bit more around what we mean when we say cardiovascular diseases. So I would like to share with you, I mean, if you can comment over here, this one should be, the different types within this bigger umbrella of cardiovascular diseases. So what are these ventures actually tackling?
Yeah, so cardiovascular disease is probably one of the largest chronic disease burden that we have globally. I think that was at some point a number published by the WHO that around 18 million people are getting annually dying because of cardiovascular diseases. And it's a massive amount of people that are actually living with it on every single year, basically. Now, hypertension is probably still the harmless form of cardiovascular diseases, considering that many people are having an elevated heart rate out there, but it has many accompanied other indications that are underlaying under it. We just highlight here the top 5. There's significantly more after it. Also, this stroke here, you always need to take stroke two ways. There's a neurology stroke, it's totally different because it happens in your head. You have the cardiovascular stroke, which happens closer to your heart. So we have 2 different strokes as well, which we also indicate in the platform. This is why this 12% here is very accurate. And then you have atrial fibrillation and coronary heart diseases, and significantly more others out there. but it's basically very, very split. And hypertension, when we also look into where funding has been deployed into previously, the majority has always been towards hypertension, because it's this, you can still somehow manage and maintain it and help people cope with it, lowering their blood sugar, therefore lowering the risk of getting a cardiac arrest, for instance, later on. So hypertension is still manageable. Once you get a heart failure, you have a heart failure. It's more like, how do you cope with someone who had a heart failure post that? So
It's more on
it's
adherence,
more
support.
it's more critical illness. So you have this hypertension, which is your chronic disease, and then you have a critical illness, which then goes towards heart failure, arterial fibrillation, stroke, etc. These are very critical illnesses that we're seeing out there. This is why the majority of ventures are in hypertension, or what we now start seeing more and more is this prevention or preventive solutions to tackle elevated heart rates in order to not develop hypertension, more on the prevention side, which we wouldn't cover in here because this is already cardiovascular focused, not so much preventive health focused.
Yeah. Let me see if we have that slide on the breakdown of categories, actually, because that's also interesting. We tackle it somewhere. This one, no, we haven't included that. I think we covered just on regulatory filings. Yeah. But it would have been interesting. Yeah.
But can you scroll down to the little bubble chart with the accompanied the spheres? Can you go lower? Lower.
No, I've changed it.
Oh, you changed it. Okay, never mind. You see that cardiovascular,
like this one.
Yeah, 19, yes.
Okay.
So you see that cardiovascular diseases have lots of overlays with other diseases as well. Now, there's a huge correlation even with diabetes. Both are chronic diseases. People who develop diabetes at a later stage, it's highly likely that they also develop cardiovascular disease burdens. People who have issues with their lung also will develop at some point a cardiovascular disease burden, considering that your lung needs to push so much energy in order to function correctly that you will get an impact on your heart nevertheless at some point. Even when you have mental solutions, cardiovascular and mental health are strongly correlated. People with cardiovascular diseases will have a mental health burden at some point. It's just very impactful. And the same as here as the preventive side. On the left-hand side, we also see that there's a correlation with it, which is not as strong as the diabetes side to cardiovascular yet, but there is a huge impact. And when you see most of these solutions that are in here, they are all somewhat correlated with one another. So it's significantly, it's a combining disease that we have here.
Combining disease. Yeah. I like the definition, by the way. It's very expressive. Okay, no, thank you for that. This was an extra content bonus, let's say, to this conversation. We commented over the clinical evidence as part, again, of our definition of clinical. Okay, let me keep that open. As part of the clinical evidence, in our definition, we always include regulatory filings, right? We do have a slide that, let's say, summarizes a bit where both in terms of geography, but also in terms of categories, digital health categories, the regulatory filings are happening. Can you spend a couple of words on this slide?
Well, the only thing that is quite interesting this year is that Europe overtook so far in Q1 North America in terms of regulatory filings of what we're seeing. Now, traditionally, filings that are made with the FDA are significantly stronger as compared to any other region, including the entire CE marking side of
why stronger? In terms of volume or in terms of requests?
No, in terms of volume of what we see. So traditionally, the FDA is the largest regulatory body because you want to bring your solution to the US market as soon as you can, considering it's still the largest market in terms of financial incentive
Yeah.
to your company. But this year, it's quite interesting that we've seen so far that most happened across the CE marking countries, so across Europe, which hasn't happened before. Now it can be just stuck in time. It's Q1, so many things could have happened after. It was only 3 ahead, but it's an interesting point to add. I wouldn't over-engineer a number out of that at the moment, considering that most filings generally come in the 3rd to 4th quarter of the year, whatever traditional historical reason. So there can be still lots of movement coming on later on this year. Oh yeah.
Do we have any? Do we have an indication of which country is leading in Europe?
Which countries?
We're not covering it here, but
Well,
we need to see the analysis at the back of this.
Generally, where we see lots of regulatory filings are happening in Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Sweden. Whatever reason, Sweden and not any of the other Nordic countries, because the UK you can't really count as it anymore. They have their own regulatory filing body now.
Right.
And the UK has been following now a path where they would like to open their regulatory filing to overseas filings, where they say, well, you got your approval in the United States, you can just launch your device within our countries, like a little goodie add-on.
Accelerated,
An accelerated path, basically, which is literally, I got my filing, I want to launch my solution, which is an interesting one because you're kind of adopting the regulatory process from other countries. The only thing that you need to keep in mind that a go-to market in the UK is different as compared to other countries as well. So
but also the ability of the bodies, also the ability of the institutional bodies to indeed monitor and control all these ventures that got the regulatory approval on another framework. So they need to have the ability to equal the rest of the different models basically applied in the world. Fantastic.
And for those those who are following our little webinars and reports already a bit longer, to the lower one, it's generally that you see most filings happening across diagnostics, remote monitoring, and patient solutions. It's just traditional. You don't see many other filings in other categories. It's just you don't necessarily need a regulatory approval for your patient education platform, because there's just no need of having that.
It's indeed a repeating pattern to have medical diagnostics in this specific slide, always on the top.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for that. Quick pit stop on partnerships, and then maybe we comment over a sample of digital health solutions in cardiovascular diseases, also because we are running out of time. So, oops, change that. Where's this one? Global partnerships,
So for the partnerships,
so
partnerships is always it's an interesting one, because you can kind of see of the go-to-market strategy from a certain venture. Now we see the majority of them, which is again not very surprising, are happening across diagnostics, patient solutions, and remote devices. And the majority is happening with academia, which is also not very surprising, considering in order to gain your clinical evidence, you need academic partners that you can work with in order to execute your strategy on the clinical filing. The ones that are always very interesting is how many partnerships you have with biopharma or with insurance or medical device companies, because these are the guys who are actually paying for something. And in cardiology, surprisingly, in 2018, it's rather limited. And if I could quickly actually take over on one side, let me do that. When we see the partnerships in cardiovascular that happened this year, most of them, again, within the institutes, are healthcare providers, clinical research organizations here. You do not see many partnerships with pharma. So you do have OncoCross here, which is somewhere at the intersection of oncology and cardiology. To some, they're partnering with a pharma, but I believe that this South Korean partnership here is more across their onco solution. And you had the Bioformers partnership with Chugai that was announced in March of this year as well. which is already part of that. And then you have the GE partnership here with Caption Health that also happened earlier. But you only had 22 partnerships so far. And this is in the entire half year and 20 days that we are now in. If you compare these now to other therapeutic areas, right? So if you take, for instance, like your oncology to that, right? You have significantly more partnerships in other therapeutic areas. You have 46. Which is a huge difference
almost,
when you actually
double,
go live with something. So there is quite a difference in what we are seeing when we see partnerships getting established across different therapeutic areas. And again, it's very difficult to monetize on your cardiology solution. This is where we still need to look into how can we further advance and the adoption of these solutions, which again is a market strategy question that we keep on coming back to.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, by the way, for showing a snapshot to Health Tech Alpha and how easy it is to indeed make these comparisons and understand what's going on in the landscape. A quick presentation of examples of digital health solutions in cardiovascular diseases. In the presentation, we have picked these three. There are many more, but
various solutions exist there. When you take the entire patient journey, you can basically find cardiology solutions from A to Z. It can be on the awareness side, it can be on the prevention side, it can be on the treatment side, it can be on the telemedicine side, it can be on the awareness and on the research side. So anything is somewhat possible here. Cure app is probably one of the most advanced solutions that we have there. They started in the smoking cessation side. Japanese venture expanded to the US about 2 or 3 years ago, very established with their digital therapeutic solutions. I can't say anything about their financial situation because I just don't know. They could be doing very well, considering they're very established within Japan and they're set foot in the US as well. But we thought the same about Pear, and ultimately it didn't really end that well. So I wouldn't make any claims about that. Goki on the other end. Goki, on the other hand, here on the right side, is quite an interesting platform considering it started as a fitness wearable, low cost in India, ventured into remote monitoring, become regulated under the Indian health regulation, and now offering awareness disease management programs for people both having hypertension as well as diabetes. Quite an interesting one. Venture is very established. You see here, it's from October 2013. So we do see that the venture is very strong. Never really ventured outside India, considering you have 1.3 billion people, the largest country in the world now by population. But the reason why the evidence thickness went in so much lower as compared to QAP on the other side is the market remains limited. There are not so many Indians who would use Goki as a solution, considering it's always an education point. This is why the score is so different between the two, for instance. But
probably the type of solution doesn't require indeed. But we have run out of time. And we actually also went through more than we had planned for the day. I thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for all the participants who joined us today. Of course, the session is recorded and will be live in all our platforms. So for any outstanding questions out there, you have my name or Darius' name, and you can reach out, be it LinkedIn, our emails, etc., etc. So feel free to drop a message, and we'll be glad to satisfy your curiosity.
And the next webinar that Anna and I will be doing is likely on the Asia Pac landscape H1 update that we will be publishing first week of July. I'm not fully mistaken.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So there we have everything, not just one pillar. But thank you again. Have a nice week ahead. Darius, see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.